Well, hi folks, welcome to another episode of One to One. Thanks for joining us today. I am very pleased to welcome my friend Calum today. How are you doing this lovely sunny spring morning?
I'm doing fantastic, thank you.
Excellent. How are you feeling about the interview?
Oh, excited.
Excited, terrified, nervous?
Terrified, yes.
You said to me when I asked you didn't like being on the camera, so we are privileged to have you today.
Oh, thank you.
So we are honoured. So thanks for agreeing to do this. And have you got peace and quiet in the house at the moment?
I do, yes.
You've managed to evict the wife and daughter?
Yes. They're away playing at the moment down the park. So
Right, okay, excellent. Well, before we get to the main part of the interview, just one question I wanted to ask, just so that we can get a bit more of a feel for the kind of person that you are. What would your ideal day consist of?
ooh,
You can
nice.
either take us from when you get up and to when you go to bed, or you can just mention some of the things it would maybe involve.
An ideal day is a slightly long lie.
What sort of time? What sort of time are we talking?
8:30 would be fantastic.
That's a long lie.
Oh, that's a very long lie. I would say get up, have a nice cup of coffee, relax, maybe, depending on the weather, take Lauren down to the park and push her on the swing for several hours. It's very relaxing. Come back, have lunch, read a book, as long as it doesn't involve going to work, that would be great,
Right. So that's the key element of your ideal day, just not being at work.
Well, yes, as long as the weather's nice and you can get out and, relax. That's the best part of a day,
Excellent. And you mentioned reading there. You're obviously quite into reading books and stuff.
I do like reading, yes. I don't like reading fiction, but I do like reading autobiographies or factual information, so
Yeah. Excellent. Sounds like a good day. So we'll get down to the serious business now. Let's go back to the beginning, as we usually do. Whereabouts were you born?
I was born in Glasgow.
Okay. And brought up in Glasgow as well, or where were you brought up?
Yes, most of the early years were spent just outside Glasgow, and we've moved about a bit, but I'd say I think it was 7 when we left that area. So
right, okay. I feel that I should probably have known this, but I've obviously just completely forgotten. So, so you grew up in Glasgow. Tell us a wee bit about your family then.
Family, mum and dad, and one older brother. They're fairly normal. What else would you like to know?
How did you get on with your brother? That's always a good one.
Relatively okay, actually. Yeah. Yeah, we had our moments, but yeah, I got on well with him. So
excellent. And what about school then? Good memories, bad memories, no memories?
Well, sort of. Primary school was great. I loved primary school. Secondary school, not so much. I'll put it this way: when I was at the secondary school, I was really good at the times table, the bus times table to get down the town. That's I could do, So
right, okay. So what sort of things were you into as a youngster, as a kid? What, in your school years, outside of school, what sort of stuff were you in? Sport, music, or anything?
Younger years, I enjoyed football. I didn't play for a team. I just enjoyed kicking around. Not so much now, but what else? Just general stuff youngsters do.
Yeah.
Not
going to school.
Yeah, that's involved with that. Yes.
And this is a question I asked Stephen last week, and it's one that I wish I'd asked everybody right the way through. But did you have a nickname at school at all, or a nickname as a youngster?
Oh, well, I've had several. Yeah, one I can remember, which I I was called Freddy Krueger for a while because that stems from I had an accident when I was at secondary school, and my face was a bit scarred at the time, so people obviously picked up on that. But it, you know,
Right, okay. Just for anyone that's watching who's no idea what that means, he was a character in a horror film back in
yes,
maybe
that's correct.
the 90s or maybe even before that, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although
Well,
I've never even seen the film, but I knew who they were referring to. So.
yeah. As far as Christianity was concerned, as a youngster, were you brought up going to church, Sunday school, things like that?
Yes, my parents and my grandparents on both sides were Christian, and I was brought up going along to church in Glasgow. Good memories of that as well, you know. I was part of life, and it was about the age of 7 that's when I realised there is a God. You know,
Right.
made perfect sense to me at 7 years old that there was a God, but not personal. It wasn't a personal God. It was just some sort of being that was greater than me was out there. You know. So,
Right. And that came about, I guess, just through hearing about God and hearing about the Bible at
yes,
home and at church, I take it.
yes, that's correct.
Right. And where did you move from? You said you moved from Glasgow when you were about sort of 7 or
Yes,
right about
we
there?
then moved up close to Aberdeen.
Right.
We were there for a few years. Um,
And then from there,
we moved down to Perth area,
right,
and
okay.
that's where my sort of base has been. Well, my parents have been in the Perth area for 30 years, 32 years, something like that. So
Right, okay. And in each of these locations, you were going to the churches in these areas and so on as well, I take it.
yes.
Aye. Let's get to the point where you leave school.
Hmm.
What a wonderful day that must have been.
Oh, it was fantastic. Yes, yes.
And so what did you do when you left? Did you go to college, uni, or start work, or?
Well, it's an interesting story. How I got involved in what I do now is I told my parents that I had enough of school. This was in fifth or yeah, I think I just entered sixth year, and I thought this is not for me. I need to find a job. So I told my father. I said I'm going to leave school. And he said, "Well, you're not leaving school until you find a job." So the next day, I got the school bus into school and went into town after after being dropped off at the school, and I spent all day trying to find a job and giving up just about the end, having nothing. And I was walking back to the bus stop, and I walked past a small printing company, and in the window it said "trainee printer required." So I went in and said, "What's a printer?" And that was the beginning of the journey.
It was the beginning of an illustrious career in the printing business.
Yes, I actually have enjoyed it for all these years. Yes.
Right. And it was literally just something that you stumbled across. It wasn't like you'd set your heart as a youngster on
Not
printing.
really, no, no.
So that was pretty good going. If you set out in the morning to find a job, and by the end of the day, there you go.
Yeah,
You had one.
I had an interview by the end of the day. Had to go back in at 5:30. Had an interview, and I started 2 weeks later. I think it was. So.
There you go, kids. That's the way to do it. If you want to get out of school, just
Stay in school. Stay in school.
So you get the job in the printers, and that's where you've been working that kind of job ever since.
Yes, I've worked in various different companies up and down the country in the years and really enjoyed it. As I said, I was working in South Wales for a while, 13 years, and now working up in Scotland. So in the printing trade.
The move down to Wales, that was a kind of a fairly pivotal sort of point in your story in terms of your faith story. You moved down to Cardiff with work, and it was sort of down there that you came to the point of a more personal faith. Just tell us maybe first of all how you ended up moving down to Cardiff. We'll not get too ahead of ourselves here.
Well, the main reason I I found a job and was offered this job in Cardiff, working half the year, which involved working a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, for the same money as I was getting for the full week. And I thought, why not? And so I went down there and they absolutely loved it. That's
Yeah.
And yes, it was. I was working and living in Cardiff when I realised that I needed lots of questions about life in general, the bigger picture answered, and it
Right.
was there. Well, nearer the end of the 13 years that I was there, that I started to investigate what is life about? Why am I here? Where am I going? Is this all there is? That was
Right.
that was the main questions that I had, that I needed answered, and started investigating.
Right. Okay. So obviously we covered the fact that while you were at school and so on, you were going along to church and
Yes,
all the rest of it. When you kind of left school and you started working and so on, did you continue going to church all those years, or was there a point where you sort of stopped going, or?
I stopped going to church when I was about 16,
Right. Okay.
or around that area. I would, yeah, I think I would have rather been out playing with my friends,
Yeah.
and but I didn't leave because I did not believe there was no God. There was nothing personal for myself.
Right.
So
Okay. And so when you went down to Cardiff, what age would you have been at that point then?
24, I
24.
think, 24.
And so you move away, you go down to this new big city, and I take it you didn't go to church straight away while you were down
No,
there. No.
no, I didn't. I It was as I was starting to investigate these questions that I picked up the Bible again, since I hadn't picked one up since I was about 15.
Right.
Started to read it, and if anyone who has picked the Bible up and starts to read it, you're confronted with a very big question that you have to have answered, and that is creation. And it was that question that led me to going along to a local church, the Macintosh, as it was called, or the Mac. And amazingly, there were a number of scientists at that church, and they helped me with these answers. And
Right.
in the journey, or in the process, it was made very clear to me that yes, God created everything.
Was there something that triggered or re-triggered your interest in answering all these questions? Was there something that happened, or was there circumstances in your life that caused you to start asking all these questions again?
Yes, I would say it was the monotony of life. Looking back now, I wasn't living the way a Christian should be living. So you begin to ask the questions: is this it? You get up, you go to work, you come home, you eat, you sleep, you get up, you go to work, repeat.
Yeah.
Is this all there is? Is this the point of why I'm here? And I began to think, if this is the only reason, then what's the point? So
Yeah.
I needed to know whether it was, or there was much more to this life. And I can pleased to tell you there's far more to this life than you could ever imagine.
Right.
You know.
And had you tried to search for answers in other things and other places and so
Oh
on?
well, no, I would put it that the more those questions came, the more I tried to drown them out,
Right.
because reality is a very scary place if you don't have the correct answers. So what I would do is I would just put those questions to rest, possibly using alcohol or any substance that would do that.
Right.
So
Okay. And so did that become quite a big feature of your life at around about that time then? Or?
Well, on a social side, yes, because the people that I worked with and the friends that I had, they were all they loved their weekends down the pub, you know, and I got involved. And
so then you start asking these questions. You find this local church. The people are helping you to find the answers. And was it a kind of almost working your way through all these questions that brought you to a point where you came to personal faith in Christ? Was it, or was there a kind of almost a light bulb moment? Or I'm just trying to think, did you kind of go through a process of getting answers to lots of these questions, or was there a kind of key moment where it all clicked?
For myself, it was a process. You know, a lot of people say I can remember the day and the time when it all made sense and came to the point, but for me, it was a process. It probably took 12 months.
Right, okay.
I was getting answers to these questions and slowly realizing that the answers were not in a pint of beer, you know. So, yes, it was a process.
Was it sort of at the end of that process that you feel that things became, you know, your faith became more real and more personal?
Yes, yes. The main question that was satisfactorily answered for myself was, did God create everything? The God of the Bible we're talking about. And when that answer became very clear, I then realized that I could trust this God. If he created everything, he could walk on the water he created, he could control the weather that he had created, he could control time, absolutely everything. And that was my point of beginning to trust a God. And when I realized that God's Son, stepped into this creation and took on a sacrifice for me, that is when I started to really trust and understand. You know, I've still got many, many questions. I mean, I think I'll have questions for the rest of my life, but it was especially for me, it was the creation, you know, because there is so much out there about evolution, Big Bang, and other interesting ideas that I had to have that question asked before I could go on to the next part of the process or the journey, you know. So
yeah, how did life change at that point?
Well, there was no big flash of light. There was no roll of thunder. But what it did was my perspectives changed. What I did with my time changed. I would rather have sat reading the Bible on a Friday night, reading a book that someone could make more sense of something that was in the Bible. That is what I did with my time for many years after that.
Right.
Although I still went out with the friends that I was with in Cardiff for quite a while afterwards, but less, and it became less and less, and they understood as I told them that I was a different person,
Right.
and they understood, and they could see that I was a slightly different person than I had been.
Did you find it easy sort of telling them and speaking to them about your faith, or how did they react
to the ones that would listen? I found it easy and they accepted. There were some that just thought I'd lost the plot. But I mean, they all just accepted that this is what Calum has done, this is where he's going, you know. So
was it down there in Cardiff that you were baptised, or was that after you moved back up?
No, I had moved back to Perth and I started going to a church in Perth called Teesside Christian Fellowship. Lovely bunch of people, very friendly. And it was shortly after I started going there that I was baptized.
Right. And it was work that brought you back up north, or?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. And so, yeah, I guess the folks at Tayside Christian Fellowship were a good help to you initially when you.
Oh, yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Can you remember much about your baptism?
Yes, I can remember. That was another process,
Right.
because for someone who's never read the Bible or even been to church, and they are confronted with baptism, it sounds bizarre. I mean, the Bible asks you, or tells you, God wants you to be baptized, which means being submerged fully in water. Now, there's a lot that didn't make sense there to myself, and I just didn't actually want to be baptized,
Right.
But the more I tried to find a reason or a loophole, I'm going to find a verse in the Bible that says that Calum doesn't actually need to be baptized. The more I tried to find a loophole, the more I realized that, hang on, this is something that is very important to God. And if I'm going to take this seriously, then I'm going to have to do this for him.
Yeah.
And as a sort of a witness to anyone who wants to come and watch this part of my life, then, it was very important.
So I think it was through mutual friends at Tayside Christian Fellowship that you first met Kelly, your wife.
That's correct.
Tell us a wee bit about how that happened.
We had both been invited to the wedding of very good friends of ours, and I have no idea whether this was a setup or not, but I found myself sitting at the wedding meal next to this wonderful girl I am now married to. So that is basically how we met, and that is a
The rest is history. Yeah.
yes, yes.
Would you say you're kind of similar, sort of personality wise, or is it kind of opposite? It's a crack type
Perfectly
thing.
Matched.
Perfectly matched.
Yes,
Excellent. And you were married in Perth Gospel Hall a few
that's
years back
correct.
now.
Yes.
Can you remember much about that day, or is it all a bit of a blur?
No, I remember it very well. I One of the best days of my life. Yes.
Yeah. Not too long after you were married, you moved down to Liverpool.
Yes.
And then you moved back up. So you were down there for, was it about a year or a couple of years?
I was in Liverpool for 1 year,
Right.
which was a great experience.
Yeah, that was another work related
That
move as
was
well.
work related. I was headhunted, and I was offered this amazing position, which was great for a year until it wasn't. So, and then, funnily enough, as I was at the end of that year, I was actually given a phone call saying that your services could be used in Glasgow.
Right.
So, and just at the perfect timing,
Yeah.
just perfect timing.
And that brought you back up. But I guess the time that you spent down in Liverpool, I guess there was a fair bit of upheaval having to move down there, and so on. But you found sort of Christian company down there in one of the gospel halls, and I guess that was a big help.
Oh, yes, that was, looking back, that was probably one of the better parts of that year. I mean, that was, yeah, I think one of the reasons that we went, or in God's control, we went there because of the help that I got in that little gospel hall,
Right.
So I think that was more important to Ellie and I than working down there, So.
Yeah. Yeah. Just another part in God's plan.
Yes, it's like a jigsaw puzzle,
Yeah.
So he knows the
Excellent.
picture he's putting together, but we don't. So
It's a very good analogy. And since then, you have become a dad.
yes,
Um, Lauren is what, about 18 months now,
18,
thereabouts?
18 months, yes.
How's that experience been for you?
That was a lovely surprise and changed our life 100%. You know, I mean, it's absolutely lovely. It's good fun, tiring, slightly stressful, you know, but absolutely amazing.
Yeah. This is why 8:30's a long life for you now.
Oh, that's yes.
Life must be quite busy, I guess, trying to juggle home life, work life, especially when you work shifts like you
Yes.
do, and being a dad, being a husband, and trying to find time to read and to study and so on. I guess that must be difficult at times.
It can be, yes, because as any shift worker knows, you don't have a routine. So it's just whenever there's a spot of calm, we try and, do it there, So,
Yeah. You've been part of Perth Gospel Hall for a few years now. How
yes,
have you found that?
I've found it great. The the people at Perth Gospel Hall, they're all normal. They're all
They're not.
very
Oh,
friendly.
hold on a minute. They're not all normal. Surely not.
Most of them are normal. Well, they were until I joined. So, yeah, they're all very friendly, very approachable, and yes, I've been helped a lot by the people at Perth Gospel Hall. Yes.
Yeah. I was going to mention or ask for your thoughts on. I know that you were part of the little study group that Joe was running a while back with some of the
Yes.
other men. I guess that was something that you found quite helpful, quite enjoyable
Oh,
as well.
very. I mean, I think I would put that in the top two best things about Perth Gospel Hall, and I can highly recommend to anyone who's got questions or needing answers, get into a small group where you can ask questions.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And so, what sort of things did you study then? Was it a kind of a discussion type thing, or how did it work?
Oh yes. Well, we studied quite a fair bit actually. I mean, we we started. I can remember we started going through the book of Daniel because that is
Nice, easy place
very
to start.
well. It's very exciting. It's a lot about what has happened in the past, a lot about history, but there's also an awful lot about what is going to happen, and a book about prophecy, basically. You know,
Yeah.
so very exciting, very very good time.
Yeah, and the thing with Joe as well. I mean, you could listen to Joe speaking about the Bible for hours and hours.
Oh, I know, I know.
Um,
Yes, absolutely.
we'll move on to a few final general questions now. First one is: have you got a favourite Bible verse?
Oh, yes, I've got hundreds.
Don't give us all of them then, but just pick one or two.
Well, as I said earlier, the biggest question that I had answered was the creation question. And one of my favourite, or two of my favourite verses correspond to this, and that is the very first verse in the Bible. To me, is very, very powerful. I mean, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Amazing.
Yeah,
Um, it tells you a lot, but it also opens up hundreds of other questions. You know, the first verse in the book of the Gospel of John, that is very closely related to the very first verse in the Bible. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God.
yeah.
Now, can I be greedy and have three?
Aye, go on then.
Another favourite of mine is it's again in the book of John. I think it's chapter 8 that where people are questioning Jesus and who he is claiming to be, and they're really sort of pressing all his buttons, you know. And he turns around and said to them, "When Abraham was, I am." Now that is probably one of the most powerful statements that he made, in my opinion. I just thought,
Yeah,
wow, in such a short, polite, sentence, he's claiming to be God. He's outside of time. He's, so for me, that is one of my favorite.
From your experience, what would you say is the best thing about being a Christian?
For me, it's peace. The peace that I have with God, and the peace that having the faith in Jesus is peace.
Yeah.
That's the best way I can put it. That is for me, it's peace. Knowing that I know where I'm going, I know my purpose, I know an awful lot more than I did before I had the faith.
Final question, I think. If you could go back in time and you could speak to your teenage self, let's say, late teens or even early 20s, what advice would you give to yourself with the benefit of hindsight?
Oh, now. Won't be an idiot.
I think we'd
That's
probably
whether I would
all
have
give
listened.
ourselves that advice.
But then again, I mean, life's experience, regardless of who you are, that's what makes you who you are. And regardless of what stage or where you've been and what you've done, I think that you wouldn't be who you are if you hadn't gone through all those experiences. That's the way I look at it. So if I was to change anything, and I wouldn't be who I am, or probably even where I am now. So it was an experience at my teenage years, so I'll leave it at that. The way I look at it is life's an adventure. It has its dull parts, it really does, but there are exciting parts where you just don't know what's next. But with trusting God, you know that whatever's next, it's all in His hands. And that's what I mean by peace. I don't need to, although we're human, we stress and we worry. It's the fact that we don't need to.
Well, you'll be relieved to hear. I think that's us pretty much done. Is there anything else you wanted to mention?
Not really, but if there's anyone watching this that's got questions, please do come along to the Gospel Hall and come to one of the gospel meetings when they start up again. I know this virus has stopped us having these meetings, but come along. I know it can be quite nerve-wracking walking into a strange place. I mean, I know exactly what it's like, but just get the courage to come in, listen to what is being said, and make sure to stay and ask questions, because you will have a lot of them. That's all I can say, really.
Yeah. And that's been pivotal in your own experience, making sure you ask those questions and get the answers you need.
I'm sure that every human being has these questions. I know they must, So.
How's that been for you then, the interview experience? Have you, as bad as you thought it would be?
Yeah, I enjoyed it, yes.
Excellent, very good. Well, thank you very much for your time, Calum. Really appreciate it.
No problem.
And thank you to everyone who has watched. I think this might actually be the final episode in this series, so we'll maybe be back at some point in the future. But thank you for watching today, and goodbye, and God bless.